mental health research that's going on at the ECB. You know, the reality is it's such a complex area. I'm not going to do mental health justice, but just going to touch the surface and give you a few examples of what's going on rather than probably into the detail. And certainly some of this is, you know, long-term prospective work that's, you know, going to take cohorts to get all the information we want out of it. By the way, my mental health is slightly better. We've just got a 4th wicket, so even though we're not probably going to go very far, we might not finish in the bottom 2 at this rate. We shall see. So what's been published? Well, good study from South Africa, but the reality is nothing from England cricket, and very little published in general around the cricketers and their mental health. There's been a few sort of narrative reviews, but you know, I wouldn't say that they've really strongly produced an evidence base for what's going on within the game or within our game. I've showed you this before, and the reality is this is underpinned by our sort of pillars of care within the ECB. So this is our science and medicine areas of interest. So women's health obviously now risen to the top, but mental health well-being probably second in relation to the areas that we're interested in, which form a juncture of the number of things that we try and address within our various business planning. So every year we do an annual business plan, and within that, this column now is devoted to women's health cricket, and there's 3 PhDs devoted to women's health, one of them in mental health, and there's a variety of other actions and KPIs in there related to mental health. So we've got 3 PhDs at the moment working in the mental health area, and the reason we do PhDs and we have research partners for these is because actually we don't know enough about research to do it properly. We don't go through ethics to do it properly. We don't analyze them properly, and we don't necessarily think outside the box or interrogate them in a way that we welcome. So we basically hand these over to our colleagues and experts. We provide an industrial support, but they provide challenge to us and take it in directions perhaps that we don't even think of. And that's the nature of research, is we let them loose up to a point. Anyway, objectives of our research: we want to know, what's the state of people who come into the game? Do we have normal people coming into cricket? Are they abnormal? How abnormal are they? You know, what's the makeup of a cricketer when they're young before they start in cricket? You know, they're a defined population that have been refined by a screening pathway, a talent pathway. So, you know, there might be a number of elements around them that are, you know, whether they're perfectionists, OCD, there are all sorts of behavioural traits that make up professional stars. Are they normal for cricket, but not normal for the population? Spend a life in cricket, then what happens to you? So what's the journey through cricket doing to you? Is it normalising you, abnormalising you? I think I've just made up a word there, but you know, what's the journey going to have on you? And as an individual, do we need to be understanding what that environment looks like? And then finally, what do we churn out at the end of a career in cricket? What's the end result look like? So, in other words, can we ensure that we've got the right understanding of the people that come in, the right journey through there, and at the end, you know, we produce healthy, robust, resilient people to walk into life? So, very simply, we started to think about, right, maybe we need to survey our population when they come in. You know, what should we ask them? When should we ask them? And we piloted a process of trying to understand what those questions might be with Bangor University, and we've started a longitudinal study. So we're basically screening all our professional cricketers where they come in and trying to work out what are the right questions. Craig mentioned the IOC documentation and surveys that are very useful, but I think we wanted to have a slightly broader church to begin with to try and understand what are the constructs that might give us some information. So besides the basic mental health markers for anxiety, depression, alcohol, we sort of threw in a variety of different things. I'm not going to go through them, but things that might give us an indication in the future of what we understand about the population coming in. So we're pretty aware now that things like ambivalent childhood or dysfunctional childhoods may have a significant impact, but are there other things within there that may tell us about the nature and makeup of the population coming in? So some of those things, perfectionism will readily sort of resonate, cognitive control, social support, do they have a good network, poor network, things that make up our population. So, first round of pilots, out of the 442 professional cricketers that were first signed up for this is the male audience. We now have a female program going, but this started just in the pandemic. We actually got, out of the 650 that included the academy, 440 replies. So pretty decent start for what was actually an optional survey. We're actually looking to mandate this, but we wanted to understand what were the right questions to answer. Unfortunately, pandemic and other things made it difficult to necessarily get full compliance. So we've lost some of the coherent longitudinal time points there. But our clever statisticians have been able to take ways in which they calculate missing data points. And out of that, we came out with 112 pretty solid scores of tracking over the 2 seasons. Very quickly, it showed that mid-season anxiety and depression, so here's depression, tended to elevate and then lowers again towards the end of the season, or by October time we'll be actually into the beginning of the sort of recovery period, and was growing from 2021 to 2022, when we have got the 23 data in yet. We saw the similar pattern for anxiety. 21, this was the first year post-COVID, 22 continued to elevate, so anxiety continues throughout the season and then at the end, and alcohol consumption actually goes up in the off-season, and these are all statistically significant within their own various time points and analyses. But we think probably there's an element of here, the first year was COVID, and the second is probably normalizing again back into what we expect to be behaviors. And now we're going to see whether that trend is just continuing to increase back to even more normal, or whether it stay the same. We don't know. So what we're hoping to do is out of that analyze what we think are all the relevant questions that work, that we think are predictive, and pull them together into a mandatory screening program. So when you first come into the game, you get asked the relative questions to formulate our understanding of you. And then we continue to ask you questions on an annual basis. So we're effectively doing cardiac screening, doing medical screening, physiological screening, but we're also doing mental health screening. So keeping track of them in the same way that we do for other conditions. While we're on this journey, we just happened to have a little pandemic. So the researcher did a quick piece on what life in the bubble looked like. And I thought I'd just mention this because they're all relevant to how we see our athletes. And effectively, bubbles weren't good for us. We saw on the right-hand side, both for the women and for the men, for anxiety and depression and for mental health, that their scores were just gradually increasing all the way through negatively, this is, the longer they spent in the bubble. And the 3 things that came out was they lost autonomy, they felt difficulties about how to manage their competency and their relatedness, i.e. their ability to have meaningful relationships and social support disappeared. So the common psychological needs. We've also been working on focus groups across men's and women's. I'll touch briefly on the men's. I think the take-home messages here is that cricketers identify as cricketers. You know, that's what they're made up to be and what they make themselves up to be. So their well-being, unfortunately, is wrapped up into their life as a cricketer. And if you look at, this is an extrapolation of data taken from the qualitative surveys, but effectively during the course of a season, the mood's all over the shop. It goes up and down, but eventually drifts downwards. So by the end of a season, they're toast, okay? You have an off season, and then some people love it. They recover, they have time away from the sport, they normalize. They can't wait to stop thinking and breathing cricket. They can go back to life as normal and their brains settle down. Another group don't know what to do. They're kind of like, it's almost like the security area that even though they struggle, they identify as cricketers. So when they don't have the cricket to identify in, they start to go off the rails. So, you know, a couple of things come out of it, but effectively they find that cricket is their true self. Their rationale to become a cricketer was to experience the euphoria, and they'll have to endure the well-being disaster along the way, potentially, because that's just part of what life is like a cricketer. And sometimes the lack of cricket was great for them, and for other people it was poor. And there's a whole load of recommendations came out of it. And then very quickly, for the women, we asked them similar questions, but also how did they feel, they wanted to be, reflect what is well-being to them. And basically, they identified well-being as just being able to do their job. That was their baseline, you know, to be able to get through and survive day to day was as good as they could expect. So a pretty low bar. And out of that, they really identified a number of sub-themes that were stressors to them. So, you know, having to meet standards of fitness compared to others, what was happening on social media to them on a repeated basis, that fear of failure. So what, you know, being judged by themselves and by others and by coaches. They weren't used to schedules of a professional life. They weren't aware of the financial implications of leaving work and starting life as a professional cricketer. And, you know, how do they cope with it? So I think my time's up. I have no idea how long I've been talking for. All I would say is that we still don't know what to do with all the information. You know, some of this we could relate to performance if we wanted to. We really don't understand the cost. No idea what the next steps are in terms of magicking cure for mental health, but it took us 110 years to get from the first genital protection to actually realizing we needed to protect our brains. So will it take us another 110 years to work out how to protect our mental health? I hope not. So I'll leave you with a number of next steps you can come and ask me about afterwards, but thank you for your attention.